Hello everyone, this is Ready Set Exploit, and we're going to be doing tech support from TryHackMe, which is a room. It's a really fun room where we find a web server that has been hacked by a spammer. Through proper enumeration, we find that the web server is running a vulnerable version of the Subrion CMS. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And we use that we exploit that CMS in order to get an initial access to the machine. Then, due to password reuse, we're able to elevate our access to another user that can run the iconv command. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It can run the iconv command as root, and then we're able. There's a couple ways to do it, but the way I do it is I rewrite the etc shadow file. I rewrite the hash of the root user so that the password is just password, and we use that to gain root access. So enough of that. It's a really fun machine, like I said, so let's just go ahead and get started. So first we can run an nmap command with sudo nmap-b for verbose output-sv to enumerate versions-sc to run default scripts-on to save it to a file called nmap.txt and the IP address of the machine. Now this can take a little bit of time to run, so I ran it prior to the recording, and we can review the results. And we have 4 ports open. We have port 22 running OpenSSH. It tells us it's an Ubuntu machine. We have port 80, which is running an Apache 2 Ubuntu HTTP server. It even tells us that we have the default page as the base page, but we can check that out in a little bit. And we have port 139.445, which is essentially the same thing for Samba, the file share service. So we can actually enumerate Samba first. I usually like to start with that. I usually always like to start from the top port all the way down. I know I can't do much with OpenSSH, and I usually like to check out the web server first, but in this case, usually the web servers tend to take a little bit more time to enumerate as opposed to SMB. Unless this requires a lot more enumeration or I don't have any access, then I go back to the web server. But really quick to check if we have Samba anonymous access. That's the first thing we want to check. So we can use SMB map-h, then the IP address to see if we have any anonymous access. So starting the get session takes a few seconds, and then we have the standard print and IPC server, which we never really have access to. They're default anyway, but we do have a web server, and it says read only, and that means we have anonymous access. Then we can use SMB client to access the file share. Just press enter, leave the password blank because we have anonymous access, dir to enumerate, and we just have one file. Typically, with SMB client, I like to mount the file share, especially if we have a lot of files and directories, so we can enumerate better using grep and such. But in this case, we can just get the one file because that's all we have. And exit, and we have our file there. Enter, and we have a little bit of, I got some good information. We have goals, make fake pop-up and host it online. And this is the first thing to notice. We have a directory, Subrion, and we can quickly look that up. What is Subrion? And it's a content management system software. I always say software. So it allows you to build websites for any purpose. So it uses PHP and MySQL. So good to know. If you can't see that, yeah. So content management system which allows you to build websites for any purpose. PHP and MySQL. So good to keep that in mind. So we know there is Subrion running. At least it says it's running, but it doesn't work. So keep that in mind. And it tells us there's a WordPress site running. It does give us the Subrion creds of admin, and what looks like it's credentials, but it actually says it's cooked with a magical formula. No WordPress creds. So we can take this, and oftentimes I go straight to CyberChef. Just Google CyberChef, always the first link, and make this bigger. And I always try magic because it does like a bunch of little things, tries to does a lot of matches. In this case, it actually finds a match right away, and it tells us how it did it. So it does from base 58, from base 32 to base 64, and it gives us the password. So we can actually repeat those steps. So from base 58, base 32, then base 64, and we have our password. So, and it makes sense. I think there was a hint to that magical formula. I'm not sure if that's what the author intended, but we have admin on our credential here. I always like to save those in a file so I have them handy. We don't have any WordPress sites. So now we can move on to the website. Since we pretty much finished the SMB, we could do like enum for Linux, maybe to look for more users, but I don't want to waste your time too much. We have the default page. Sometimes, always a good habit to check the source. Unfortunately, there's nothing here. Check the source with Control U. So we can begin our enumeration. Let's see, I'm gonna keep that handy just for the IP. Call this Alt-Shift-S, call this Go. We're gonna run a Gobuster dir -u for website, and I think I copied the whole thing. And I'm gonna use the seclist word list, discovery, web content. I'm gonna use directories 2.3. You know what? I'll use small. I think it'll work. And we're just gonna use threads 50. Actually, we're gonna save it -o to a file called dirt.txt. Let's run it. And I use threads 50 so it speeds it up a little bit. And we should get a couple of hits, and we get 2 WordPress and tests. And those are the only ones we're gonna get. So we'll leave it at that. So let's copy that. We can check that out. And we can also check out this one. Copy that, let that load. And actually, there we go. So the test site, it's pretty ugly. It's a site that got scammed, clearly. There's very nice work here of the author. It looks pretty good, but let's not focus on this too much. I'll save your time. There's not much you can do here. My first run of the machine, I did spend some time here thinking I had to do something, checking the source, but I'll save you a little bit of time. We do have this WordPress site, which again, I spend quite a bit of time enumerating this site, just in case there was something. Normal enumeration, looking at the blocks, we have a support user, and always, first thing I tried was WP admin, and let's see, creds. I'm thinking admin, that password didn't work. No unknown username. So then I tried support, since that's the blog that we saw. Try that password, didn't work. So usually after that I don't try anymore, especially on these kind of type of machine teams. So you don't want to waste too much time. So then I try to move it on to the content. Look to see if I have any themes that I can access. No. Plugins. No. Okay, and you can enumerate these for any weak plugins. You could run WP scan, but if you don't get much from that, then best to move on to something else. The one thing that definitely caught my eye, and it's always good to go back, is always going back to how you start. So when I got stuck here a little bit for the first time, I was like, all right, well, let me go back to that note. And the note told me there is a Subrion directory, and I know that that's a content management system. So I tried this, and I got redirected to my own localhost IP, not localhost, but my own like Ethernet IP. This isn't even my TryHackMe IP address. So it redirected me, told me I'm unable to connect. So I thought this was weird, because if we type like anything, it says not found. So I thought that was weird behavior. So what I did is I ran a Gobuster against it. Let's see, I'm gonna call this Subrion, and then I did that, and I tried looking for things, and this gave me, okay, we have a wildcard, everything's too many results going to 301, so we can, whenever I'm dealing with 301, which is a redirect HTTP, I always like to use -F to force the directory, so that way it actually ends with this dash. Let's see, and then we're gonna blacklist that, and also tells us 302 and 404. And -F, the best way I can explain it is, a lot of times it does get redirected. You know, you find directories because, you know, it tries it without it, and then the web server just redirects you there anyway, and that's what Gobuster prints out. So, and you always get like a 301. And in our case, we get a match here for install. So we know this directory does work. Copy selection, and let's try this. We have a 403 for updates, and we get 3 hits here: panel, install. So let's check that out. Install, and we get a match for Subrion installation. We got a version number right here. Version, it's kind of too small, but it's 4.21. We see that it is indeed installed, and there was another hit, which was panel. And there we go. We have the admin login page, which we have our credentials already. And we can try to log in. We know it works based on the note. And that's the way I originally found it. I suppose another way you could have found it is, we didn't have a version information, but we know Subrion is running. You could have done Subrion exploit. Could have looked at this one, the cross-site forgery, or the arbitrary file upload, and realized that it's Subrion panel, and you could have tried this link. Same here, target Subrion panel, and you would have realized, you would have found it that way too. I guess that's another way you could have found it. But anyway, we log in, we're on the dashboard, and I don't know why I closed that out. We have a version number, 4.2.1, and there's a couple of exploits, and I'm going to look at this one. But there's a GitHub page, and this one pretty much just we can clone this. You can even examine the code here. So what this does is, once a user and a password, it logs in, gets the cross-site request forgery token, tells us login successful, check credentials, or failed to get the cross-site request forgery token. Then it creates a random shell name. Oh, and let me take back. So how does this exploit work? Let me see this say here. Let's see, vulnerability. Well, essentially, the vulnerability is because we can upload a .var, PHAR file, and it allows us to achieve remote code execution. And that's what this does. See, so it creates a random file name, and see, .var, and it then allows us to get remote code execution. What it does is replaces the panel. So URL shell, which is this. So our URL plus uploads. So it will be Subrion panel uploads, then it removes panel, and then it just does. So it will be Subrion uploads, then your file name .var, cmd equals id, and then you can execute code. So you can do this 2 ways. You can just clone the GitHub repo, do Subrion, so git clone, and CVE, we could do, yeah, we just -u for the target. Let's see. Just copy this whole thing. -u, and then -l, -p, and then if you run this, it's also a success. Trying to log in, that's a crossover first of request forgery token, and it takes a second. Oh, it's a pretty nice script because it creates everything on the code that's in, and then we have our file name here, and we have remote code execution ID. We're the user, so you know, all fun. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, if we go here, I'll do that after. So we could just replicate this. You know, so we know it creates a shell, and we know it goes somewhere to upload. It's pretty straightforward. We can just, and you know, if you're doing some kind of like if you're running for like some kind of blood, like you want to pound the machine first, you know, stick to the script and figure out what it did later. But if you want to try it manually, I always like to, because it's just a lot of fun to do. We can create vi shofar and just PHP, oh my gosh, echo system quest RSE. RSE could be anything, could be blah blah, doesn't matter. You know, it matters for the parameter later, but I think I got everything, and we have our file there. And now from here we go to content, uploads, and we're gonna see the file we uploaded. Let's delete this one. Gonna see, we can upload files, select files, shell.far, and it's uploaded here. And just like it told us, copy this link, delete this, keep uploads, the script remove panel, and then it went there and didn't work. Let's see, panel, uploads, shell.far. There it is. Okay, so I think if I just go to uploads, it doesn't work, but if I go to the actual name, it does work. So from here, RSC, that's the parameter I chose, ID, there we go. We have remote code execution. So now I'm going to use curl. I'm going to call this curl. I'm going to call this netcat. Have netcat listening. I'm going to do curl. We're going to do the target data URL encode. We could do rsc.id to test this out. And I could use -d, but data URL encode, just that's what it does. The URL encodes it so it avoids errors. So we could do this, and there we go. So now we could do bash-c -i dev tcp, my IP address, which is right there. Really should get used to copying and pasting my IP address there. There. Now, if I do this without the URL encode, see, I'm listening. It would probably fail. It does. Too many quotes and whatnot. But if we do it with data URL encode, see, it's what I do. Oh, well, you know, let's fix that error. There we go. See, didn't work. No reverse shell. But if we clear this, we do it this way. What do we do? I'm pretty sure this worked last time. Data URL. Oh, okay. I know what I did. Whoops. There we go. You see, it's hanging. We got a reverse shell. So now we can upgrade it. Python-3, Python 3-c import pty.spawn bin bash. Control C to background, stty raw-echo, semicolon fg, press enter twice, export term equals xterm. Now, still not done. That's just to upgrade my shell to have a more interactive. You see how the f wraps around and it gets all weird. We can do stty-a. We get our rows and columns here. Rows 32, columns 130. So we could do stty rows 32, columns 130, or COLS. And now, if I do that, it won't wrap around. So, a lot nicer to deal with. And we have a reverse shell. We could do a couple things. Let's see. So, from here, remember we have WordPress running, and you could do something. You could run something like limpiece, and you could probably find it. I didn't try it, but if we go back to the HTML, we remember that there's a test here, Subrion, and we have WordPress. I believe, you know, whenever we're dealing with CMSs, I like to look at them because we may have like configuration files. Save your time here, but WordPress always has a configuration file, and it's called wp-config, and it has the MySQL database credentials. So whenever you see WordPress is running, you're dealing with WordPress, always worth checking. And the first thing I like to do is try. We have our password here. I like trying this password with any other users on the machine. We have scamsite. If that doesn't work, then I try logging into the MySQL database with these credentials and see if I have any passwords there. And there is one for the support user, which works for WordPress. But unless I was in one, this was a Docker container, which is not, because we don't have the Docker env file, .docker env file here at the beginning. You know, because maybe Subrion CMS is running out of a Docker container and WordPress is running out of another, and that was a required step. I wouldn't try to crack that, you know, user hash. But let me digress. So, got our password. I'm going to save it, and let's try it. Scamsite. So su dash. This is so we can go to the home user if it does work. Paste the password, and we're in. We are the scamsite user, and I can write that scamsite. Save. So from here, we can do two things. We can do sudo -l, and we can run icon v as the root user. So pretty straightforward. We also, if you want to have a little bit of easier persistence in case you lose a reverse shell, we can write into this directory, and we know port 22 is listening, so we could make dir ssh dot ssh cd dot ssh, and do ssh dash keygen dash f. I'm going to call this scam. Press enter, no passphrase. Cat scam.pub authorized keys, and we're going to do scam, and we have our private key. We're going to copy this, new tab, Alt-Shift-S, SSH, scam, paste this, and we're going to chmod scam. And now we can, what's my IP address? And now we can ssh-i scamsite at IP address. Yes, know the host. And there we go. Now we have two shells. Let's remove scam. And I always just like to, it's a good habit once I have it on my local machine. But it's easier to deal with things than SSH. So, and we have two shells. If you want to run limpies on one and then look around on the other. So sudo-l, we can run this. And you can look this up. Icon v, actually, always a good place to check is GTFO bins. And this was a good lesson for me because, you know, whenever I go to GTFO bins and I can run the sudo, I go straight to the sudo and I see what I can do, instead of taking a little bit of time and reading what I can actually do. Because at first I was just I was reading files and I was like, you know, and I got a little bit stuck. Yeah, I could read the flag, but I wanted to get a shell. And more often than not, these machines or rooms are intended for you to get root access. So, you know, it took me a little bit, and then I realized, wait, if I scroll back up, and this is always a good habit, always read from the top to see what it could do, how this exploit works. We can write files and read it. And just because sudo only tells you can read, that doesn't always mean you can't do this. So we can read and write. So we could set the file to a variable, but it's a little cumbersome. I'm going to go ahead. You could just write the file here. So we can read the file by running this command with the 8859-1, _1 encoding, and then the file name. So we can try this. Let's see. Try this. We can do sudo user bin icon v paste. Always good, you know, good file to try reading is the shadow file, and we can read it. So we can know that works, and we can write. So we can overwrite anything to a file we want. So there's a couple ways to do this, I'm sure. The way I did it is I just rewrote this file. I just rewrote the password here of the root user, this bcrypt hash. And the way I did it is, if you Google like, I don't know, Unix, shadow, OpenSSL, create password. It's here from unix.stackexchange. Sure. And right here, the first method, SHA-256, this command right here. And then we can create whatever password we want. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. So let's clear this. OpenSSL passwd-6-so xyc, and the password is going to be just password. And we have our password here. I have that highlighted. I'm going to the temp directory because it's just easier to do that stuff from there. You could also go to dev.shm, and I'm going to run this again and save it to a file called shadow.back. Just in case I mess it up, I have a backup. And then I'm going to do it again to a file called shadow. Then I'm going to edit this file, and we're going to delete it from this number 18775 or whatever. I don't know if you might have a different number, I don't remember. But from here, V to go into visual mode all the way to the end, with control left, and then delete. I to insert here, copy, control shift S, and WQ to write. So control shift colon, and then at the bottom you see I just wrote right Q, so right quit. And now we have that. So I think if we do MD5 sum, actually no, that won't work because they're different. So anyway, yeah, so MD5 sum shadow, and now we're gonna rewrite it. So how we're gonna do that, if the only thing that changes is we can echo our data. In this case we can cat the data, it's just that, and then we can do a -o. So we're going to -o there, cat shadow, and we're going to pipe it over to shadow file. And if we run this command again, md5 sum, we see that the two are a match, which means we effectively wrote it. And if we do su root -root, allows us to go to the home directory of root, do passwrd, there we go, we are the root user, and we can get our flag. So that's, you know, one way to do it. And if we check again, we have an SSH directory, and we see we have a private key and a public key, but no authorized key files. And that was required. So the first time I remember getting the key and thinking, oh, there you go, that's it, and I couldn't get in, and I realized the authorized key wasn't there. So, you know, so that's why at first it wasn't working. So then I tried it this way, and to confirm my theory, you know, even though I knew I couldn't read it, so therefore I knew it didn't exist, but it was just easier to edit the shadow file, and then we can just repeat what we did earlier. Authorized keys, and we can cat this file, and then we have to check if root access allowed. It is, because there's a key, but it's always good to check. So we could call this root idrsa chmod, and need that IP address. Really should just use the head command. So ssh-i root, didn't have to go all the way to the end. And if you weren't sure how to check, you could do cat ssh sshd config grep, you could do grep -i root thing. There you go, permit root login, yes. And you just do that, give it a second, and there we go. We have SSH access as root. And yeah, that's pretty much the machine. So a lot of fun, you know, a lot of fun doing this machine. I really enjoyed it. You know, you really can easily get lost, especially when trying to enumerate the WordPress or that scam test site. But I think that's what the machine, at least in my opinion, tries to teach you. I remember there was like, I remember thinking there was a clue here. Okay, yeah, no. Well, there's one clue here. This is part of the history file, which I forgot to mention. Always good to check the history file when you first gain access as a user, because you could kind of, there was a big indication here that's what the next move was. But anyway, because we didn't do this. But anyway, so, you know, it teaches you that whenever you get stuck, because you're supposed to get stuck in the WordPress and the test site, knowing when to get stuck and take a step back and keep enumerating, because really that's what it, in my opinion, what it comes down to. You know, enumeration, and then knowing when, you know, finding that thing that, okay, this seems to be going somewhere, and keep going. So really big props to the creator for creating this room, putting the emphasis on it. At least that's what I think. In my opinion, that's what I took from this machine. So anyway, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Then I'll see you all next time.